have chapters worldwide, thriving number of meetup events, online Slack members, and lots of members worldwide. So check out if your community already has a chapter. If not, please get in touch with us. We'd love to help you set one up. If you are in undergrad or university, college, or in high school, get in touch with us about setting up a student club. Love to help you out with that too. Definitely join our Slack, and keep on meaning to add Discord, please, as places to keep in touch with us. And check out learn.neurotechedu.com for our online educational platform. You can also receive a newsletter and check out the job services boards at NTX with NTX services. And I should also add the new the list of all the labs and things with the Neurotech
ecosystem.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
The ecosystem.
It is cool. It is cool. So anyway, welcome everybody, and yeah, a really packed week of events. Since I didn't fully catch last week's, I'm gonna ask if anybody is joining here for the first time, if you don't mind introducing yourself. Or maybe you came last week and I didn't hear your intro. Not that there's a requirement.
Well, hey guys, I think I'm the only new person here that I could tell. My name is Carlos. I'm a biomedical engineer by trade. I was born in Venezuela, grew up down here in South Florida in Miami. I'm now a Neurotech founder. I'm working on developing a smart clothing service for pro sports teams to reduce injury risk and also improve performance. I'm looking forward to just to connecting and being a part of this community. I mean, it's hard to find a lot of Neurotech people down here in Miami, apart from, my biomedical engineering professors. So I'm looking forward to meeting other people. Thank you so much.
Terrific. Yeah, drop a link if you have anything that we can check out. If you want to drop a link in the chat.
Yeah, I mean, we're still kind of early stage, still kind of stealth mode, but yeah, no, for sure. The moment we launch, I'll be posting away all our marketing material all over Slack.
Okay, great. So terrific.
I love the concept of stealth mode for startups. It's kind of exciting. It's like you're lurking in the shadows, ready to pounce. Or
yeah, I think for the most part, I think it's like stealth mode to control your brand. It's not kind of stealth mode for the idea, right? Because I mean, it's not really that novel an idea, and of course, ideas are nothing without execution. But I think a big part of it is so much about branding that you kind of want to make sure that when you do come out, you have a really wholesome, powerful brand that actually resonates with people, and not some just really poor designed landing page.
Got it.
Yeah.
Like Kernel had for a long time, as I recall.
Yeah.
The Kernel page was like empty for about 3 years.
Yeah. San Francisco has a lot, or the Bay Area has a lot of stealth startups. Like every couple blocks, you see a startup that does not have a web page at all and doesn't even have a logo or a name.
I'd love it if there was some kind of, if you could spot a stealth startup person in the street, if there was some kind of like typical characteristics. And if you've been in San Francisco long enough, you can be like, stealth.
Yeah,
stealth.
I know.
See the way the back of his leg kind of twists? Yeah, stealth.
Yeah, I mean, if you know what buildings to look for, like over in Alameda, there's a rocket company, and for a long time, they just were fully playing into stealth. They were like, we're stealth rocket company. We have no brand yet. Now I know they've come somewhat out of stealth, but yeah, it's smart working on branding and figuring out how to brand early. I'm excited to see what you have to show. And yeah, sportswear is definitely a place that a lot of people are starting to care about for smart tech and neurotech and biotech.
Cool. So yeah, hopefully, Balder said that he would probably be joining early. I haven't seen him yet, but what does anybody have any particular topics that that you'd like to start with? There's going to be lots to cover, but any particular interests? Yeah, Poe.
Hi, sorry, I have to leave really quickly for another meeting.
Tell us what's frustrating you right now with Cyton.
Yeah, so I recently discovered that even though it records at 250 hertz, the raw data is not at 250 hertz. So the timestamps don't line up. And so if I take the beginning timestamp and the end timestamp of my raw data, it is significantly less than my expected amount of samples, if that makes sense.
Sure.
For people, yeah, you go.
So, and when you say that, when you're talking about the timestamps here, you're talking about this is like coming, right? You're just recording to disk, and this is your what OS are you on?
Sorry? Oh, I'm on Mac OS. It's the timestamp when the computer receives the signal. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Okay, and I mean, so and is it's off by a lot?
Yeah, was, but I just used BrainFlow, so the amount of samples is now solved. But because the timestamps are still not perfect, I was wondering how everyone actually. So I need to record events, right? And how do you guys sync your events up with the timestamp that was recorded on the EEG as opposed to the timestamp on my laptop?
So, are you using EEG notebooks?
No.
And there is a correct answer to this question.
Oh God, should I be saying yes? Okay, I am.
Yeah. Play the stuck record. Let's get the stuck record going. We talk about this quite often.
So, I mean, it's certainly it's a really tough question, right? With Bluetooth, right? So the big problem with any Bluetooth headset is the computer that's like running the headset is not the one. I mean, you know, the headset itself is separate from your PC, and hopefully your PC is doing the stimulus presentation.
Yes.
Right? So it's really like it's like, you know, if you're using something like PsychoPi, which is what EEG Notebooks is using, you know, you're relying on PsychoPi to kind of do all the stimulus presentations in such a way that you get accurate timestamps from your OS. Okay. And now that, like, in some ways you trust the stimulus presentation timestamps more than you trust the Bluetooth EEG timestamps, right? And that's just because of this you know, transfer function that you can't really account for fully. But you're hoping that your Bluetooth packets have enough consistency and enough, you know, are like being broadcast well so that everything else works in your software stack, and you're getting relatively accurate, you know, relatively accurate timestamps. There's gonna be a little slop there, But hopefully there's a little, not like a small enough amount of slop that, like, you know, when you've got like 100 trials or something, that you don't have to worry about it.
I see. So EEG notebooks. Where do I get my hands on that?
So check the meetup agenda, because in 2 minutes, John Griffiths is going to give us an update about EEG notebook development, and
Fantastic.
as well as anybody else who wants to comment on it. But if you're using BrainFlow, then use EEG notebooks and get BrainFlow Plus, right? You know, get BrainFlow Plus PsychoPy plus M&E, right? And you know, be doing what all the cool kids in Cogneuro are doing.
Yeah. So Poe, what are you actually doing? What's your experiment?
I'm trying to find error-related potentials. I'm doing this work on behalf of a PhD student because they want to integrate it with their SSVEP stuff. Yeah, to correct their errors.
So if you want to do SSVEP stuff, you're also in the right. You kind of want to check out PsychoPy as well. I mean,
You guys have done it all.
it's very much. I mean, if anything, like, it became a Cogneuro used tool after it was a vision science tool. So it was definitely developed as a Python replacement for Psychophysics Toolbox. And,
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
in essence, my next step would be to look at PsychoPy to integrate into BrainFlow.
no, your next step is to download and install EEG notebooks and collect a steady state V, because it's already there for you.
Wait, I don't need to do anything with SSVP. I just want to do the ERP stuff. Yeah.
Well, so when you say ERP, again, like, give us some more details.
Okay, so when the user observes an error made by the algorithm, I want to catch that error. And so right now I have a paradigm to introduce those errors and simulate them, well, not evoke them, so that I can prove that they exist.
So are you trying to do something a little like human in the loop reinforcement learning kind of stuff, where it's like,
yeah,
somebody's watching a game, and then, like, when you see the person make a mistake,
yeah, exactly,
you're basically looking for an error related negativity.
yes. So
Okay.
the whole non-synchronization thing was kind of annoying for time-based frequency.
Well, you know, yeah. So what's your game, or like what are they watching?
They're operating. They're playing a game that will be moving a square. So a square will pop up, and there'll be a square on either side. A square will either be on the left side or the right side, and it will be within 3 steps away. Your job is to move your square to the target square. And so that's pretty easy. But sometimes when you push the left key, intending it for it to go left, I'll introduce an error and then catch that, hopefully.
Gotcha. So what's the game written in? Or, you know, like
Python. Pygame.
Game? Is it like a Pygame game?
Yeah, it's a Pygame game. Gotcha.
So super interesting. I mean, yeah. So, but I take it that this is a Pygame game that wasn't designed for EEG, in the sense that, like, nobody's already given you some mechanism to be sending events via LSL or something like that.
God no. It's a game that has an added addition of recording timestamps from the system.
Okay, so And is this a game that you can share?
Yeah. That's a good question.
Okay.
I don't. I'm going to say no because this is for like with a paper in mind and stuff. That it's not my property.
If it's for a paper, then hopefully it will definitely be shared, even if it's embargoed. So it's a real problem. I think it's one in which there are fewer off-the-shelf solutions, in the sense that like unless that game was kind of like written in advance, knowing that you were going to try and do this, there's not going to be any easy answers for you. What some people do is to the record, so basically you have your experiment also generating LSL events. That is something that your OpenBCI device can be recording to, and by kind of it's a way in which you can kind of synchronize these two programs to be somewhat on on the same time base. Getting them to generate that, so I see what you're doing is like you're logging this in a kind of Unixy way and then trying to import in these events, is what I take it you're trying to do.
Import these events. Yeah, so the events will be recorded with a timestamp, and I assume those timestamps will line up with something that are recorded from the raw data.
Yeah.
Which I was really wrong about, clearly.
Yeah. It's like it's great to be young again. It's an idealistic.
A warning. I've spent 2 months on this trying to figure out what the frick was wrong. That's all right.
Well,
Yeah.
Certainly super happy. I'm curious what the hell was going on with the blink, until you used BrainFlow and you weren't getting the right number of samples. But yeah, I don't know what to say except, like looking into LSL and seeing what that's doing in terms of adjusting those timestamps. But I honestly don't know if that's it's nice to think that game is giving you a relatively accurate set of timestamps, but have you checked it? So, typically when people would kind of like pilot one of their experiments, they would like use a photodiode or something to actually capture some of the the actual timestamp, in the sense that like this is when these pixels turned on the screen according to my game, and like wire that into your OpenBCI, wire that into one of your Cyton channels that you could lose, for instance.
Wow, who's asking about timestamps with a photoresistor?
No,
I know exactly what y'all are talking about.
Yeah.
Hey, Richard. So Richard's with OpenBCI, and but I think Poe's problem is really that his game, he's doing EEG of a game, of people playing a game.
Look, when you do the photoresistor, you're going to need to use an opto isolator. The documents that we currently have, it says it's the hard way, but it's really the only way to do it to make sure you're not getting signals bleeding over into the Cyton. Because if you put the easy method was like, oh, just put a resistor there and it'll pull down the voltage. And if the Cyton and the Mark IV are all like little dry electrodes are plugged in and everything, you'll see noise there. But if you do an opto isolator and and by the way, whenever you've got the Cyton connected to the electrodes and it's not connected physically to the head, it's basically like a big antenna, right? So you're gonna pick up all of the EMF, and hopefully when you connect it, there's less. But Yeah, when you do the opto isolator, it doesn't really inject any signal because it gets the power from the board on one side and the power from your Arduino or whatever. And so what I even set up was I used like a battery node that you can find on Thingiverse, and I put a little Raspberry Pi in it. And then I did the opto isolator method to the thing. So let me show you. I've got it right here. This is how I want to do connect. I know I just kind of jumped in, but y'all are kind of talking about one of my jams.
Okay, but this might be way past. I mean, I don't think Poe had actually got to the point of trying to do any of this.
Well,
Maybe I should explain what I'm trying to do.
I also want to comment that if you can figure out how the game's clock and can control that and export that as an LSL, that might be possible.
Is this in
but-
Unity?
He said Pygame, so I haven't used Pygame, but I'm assuming you can control a game clock. But also,
You're gonna want to get the time. I mean, you're gonna get the. I would get if you collect the signals using BrainFlow in Python, you're gonna get the timestamps whenever BrainFlow receives it, and then you can just use those. You don't need to call system clock again at a different method. You know that you received that data at this time from the BrainFlow thread.
Okay.
And just use those.
So if I hypothetically just recorded the events at which, like the timestamps at which stuff popped up on my computer window and recorded the system time, those will be the time that is the same time as like the BrainFlow timestamps.
I'm doing something that people in India do. And I only know of it in passing, which is not a yes and it's not a no. It's like I kind of agree. It's not going to be.
I feel like we should try this out. I haven't tried it. I'm just thinking about it.
It's going to be close. And it'd be great if you could figure out that for every screen, I think Morgan was probably talking about that before I came in. And I'm glad I could jump in and help because I'm not feeling that great. But yeah, there's going to be a little bit of a difference. And the factors that go into that are the quality of the serial connection. You need.
Yep.
Are you on Windows or Mac?
Mac.
Poe, the best thing to do, I think, is to stop timestamping the way you're doing it and to just use push an LSL timestamp the way that it's done with CyclePy in the EG Notebooks experiments, because that's something that we know how to kind of stitch together a stream coming from an LSL process and an EEG stream. So that'd be like the easiest thing in terms of taking something that's already been done and kind of somewhat works. And you can see how that's being done in the code. I can point you to specific lines if you like.
Go ahead.
Also, one important thing that a lot of people forget is your system clock of when it says it renders something and it actually rendering on a screen can be about 80 milliseconds different depending on how your screen is connected to your computer, what clock your screen is at, what refresh rate, and what pixel delay time. Like NVIDIA actually released a tool that recently literally just analyzed the mouse click to screen delay, and it's high. It's like depending on your system, it can.
But you can't change that. There is one that you can. Okay, have you done the FTDI buffer fix for Cyton? Alex is your guy for
Yeah.
LSL. But look, very seriously, all these delays you cannot do. Have you done the FTDI buffer fix on your Mac?
Hell no. I don't even know what that is.
Okay, there with the serial port, there's a setting that they won't allow us to make a text file to modify. And let me just drop the link in the chat.
Okay.
There. So with your Cyton, you'll notice you made when you spun up the GUI, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Does the data come in choppy
Sometimes, yes.
with the Cyton? Well, if you went on a Windows and you did the FTDI buffer fix, you would realize it's smooth as butter. Because there's a latency and it's set to 10 milliseconds and you can drop it to 1. Let me give you the link to that. It's very important.
Thanks, man. Alex, if you can chuck me your last name, I'll contact you. Thank you so much for your offer.
No worries, pal. I'll make sure you get all these names and references and things. And yeah, Alex in particular has to deal with games where he doesn't get to control them in the sense of like they're like Xbox games or something like that. So he's definitely had to do more than others in terms of getting timestamps lined up. And so if we could though, just because Boulder is going to have to he's also in Australia, I think. And is going to need to go in about 45 minutes. So I'm going to switch a little earlier than normal to our speaker today. And thank you, Boulder, for joining us. So Boulder is the founder and CEO of Plato Science. And you're in Melbourne right now?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'm almost a full day ahead.
Well, so you and Poe are in the same.
Hey.
And but you're I want to say you're also at the Copenhagen Institute of Neurocreativity.
Yes.
And so you, when was the Indiegogo project, or
oh yeah, that's actually back in 2019, almost 2 years ago now. Since we launched the campaign and then we delivered end 19.
Yeah.
And now we have an ongoing sale of products, but we're launching a new product on Indiegogo in, I think, April this year.
Oh, okay. Well, so let me turn it over to you for can you tell us something about Plato Science and like what you're working on, and even better, what's coming?
Yeah, absolutely. Can I share some slides here?
Yes. So the middle button on the left, bottom left corner.
Oh yeah, there we go. Thank you. Let's see. And I even have access. That's wonderful. And hopefully you can see this.
Yes.
Perfect. Yep. Cool. So I see some familiar faces. I've been giving a couple of talks at NeurotechX events recently. So sorry for those who have heard some of this before. My name is Balder. I'm originally from Norway. Have been spending the last 12 years around the world, but having Copenhagen as my base, and recently relocated to Australia, to Melbourne, and are currently running the company from here. So Plato Science is a Copenhagen-based neurotech startup. We've been, I think, registered for 5 years, but probably been working on this for about 7 years now. And we do 3 main type of activities. So we do more classical neuroimaging studies, mainly through our university collaborations. So that's mainly FNIRS. Used to do fMRI, do still quite some EEG. Then we have been working a lot with cognitive training and the effects of systematic changes over time. So we're very interested in how can we impact the way the brain shapes over time by any type of interaction. And then finally, we work with devices to do so as well. So I guess the more active end of BCI. And I'm sure you guys have all heard about numerous products that are doing different type of brain stimulation. So I just put up 3 different ones here that are currently, especially the NeoRhythm. You guys are probably all in the target group, so I'm sure you also, like me, are being spammed a lot with ads for that product. And I think I find the whole brain stimulation movement extremely fascinating, because it's such a tricky mix of 100% BS, people just inventing something and say we have 5 magnets and we're doing some type of magnetic stimulation, and no one ever did any studies on it, and all the way through to TACS, TDCS, TMS, which I would say are fairly established. And what
is that NeoRhythm you were referring to just now?
Yes, yeah. So I normally don't mention I normally don't mention the name, but you guys probably have all seen this thread on Reddit, where it's a very interesting thread where basically the CEO of one of these new companies are basically threatening to sue people on Reddit for being critical to the technology. And I think what I want to do in this talk is to try to explain a little bit about the idea behind Plato Science and our sort of approach to brain stimulation, and hopefully we can have a bit of a discussion both about the general technologies, but also about TDCS, TACS, and the future of integrating neurostimulation with different type of neuroimaging or neuro reading technologies that I know all of you are very good at. So I'm sure you've heard or seen Halo Neuroscience. They have the headset on the left, which is a TDCS neurostimulation headset. It is designed to target the motor cortex and was marketed for athletes and to a certain extent musicians, so for sort of improving motor activities. And Halo focused a lot on what they call Neuro Priming. Unfortunately, Halo went bankrupt a couple of months ago and were bought by a Swedish company called Flow that does neurostimulation for depression treatment. So, by the way, I can't see you guys, so if you have any questions or comments, please just speak out. And I think Halo did some very interesting things, but their emphasis was on this idea of neuro priming, which is sort of, I guess, warming up the brain to be more plastic. And I think it's sort of not very well documented why neurostimulation should have a priming effect. Another interesting product to me was the good old Think product, which is the one in the middle, which is it's actually vagus nerve stimulation. So it's doing stimulation behind the ear or in the neck, but it's been marketed as a brain stimulation device. And the company Think now has a product called Zing, which is a small sort of patch behind the ear. And then our product Plato Work, the first one from us, is also using TDCS. So it's the same as Halo, but it's focusing more on the frontal lobe, so F3, F4, and PSET, so the default network, and activating those 3 regions in different patterns that I'll get back to. So I'm sure most of you have heard about TDCS before, but I just wanted to sort of wrap it up. This is how lab-based TDCS often look. So you have big wet sponges, and they are strapped to the head most of the time to different sponges. And most researchers would use the 1020 electrode placement system to place the TDCS electrodes. And then you basically send a direct current into one electrode, and that current will, of course, find the path of least resistance and being picked up by the other electrode. And
I have a question on that before I know you're
Yeah.
going to go through them. Is this patient in this clinical picture right here? Are they measuring at the same time or just inducing current and that's it?
Just inducing current, and
Oh,
that's it's a very good question, and it's a very interesting part of me point to me for TDCS and neurostimulation in general is most of the research so far has been without sort of continuous monitoring. So you do some type of sort of pre-measurement, then you do the stimulation, and then you do post-measurement. There are studies mapping it with EEG, FNIRS, and fMRI, but it's quite limited. There are also a lot of studies using different type of cognitive measures. You would sort of test the cognition of the participants while being stimulated. And in this sort of one-directional type of logic, it's been used quite widely, and of course DARPA, as always, have been pioneering it. And of the sort of famous examples, I think pilot training and sniper accuracy, but also for clinical purposes, anxiety, depression, and stroke rehabilitation. It's still being used quite widely. We have one collaboration with a clinic that does cognitive rehabilitation using TDCS. And the sort of the classical understanding of TDCS has been that you send the current into one location, and in that location you have an increase of the potential for natural activity. And where the current is coming back out, you have the opposite. So it's a decrease in the potential for activity. And I'll get back to why I say that this is a very sort of simplistic way of looking at it. But what it seems to be, and this is, I guess, part of the problem with neurostimulation in general, is there are still a lot of different theories about exactly how it works on a neuronal level. But the sort of, to me, the strongest hypothesis is that, so the basic function, as you all know, is there will be a transaction of an electrical signal that triggers a chemical reaction that passes the electrical signal on. And it's sort of the most simplistic way of understanding it. And the standing hypothesis that I support, at least for TDCS, is that in any situation where there is a threshold for activity which is a little too high for the electrical signal to trigger the chemical reaction, the current that is induced has a microscopic effect on the threshold for activity, either in a positive or a negative direction. So you have a sort of positive or negative polarization of the synapses, which makes it easier or harder for it to fire on natural grounds. And for me, it's quite interesting to look at what's the amount of current you need to actually have that effect. And what it seems, at least 1 milliampere, we use 1.2 in most of our studies, but there are studies using up to 4 milliamperes. And that's part of the, how much is needed. And one of the things that got me and my co-founder Morten, who's a neurobiologist, to start Plato Science was when we were working with TDCS in a more lab context. We were quite frustrated by both the sort of the complexity of the equipment itself, but also the whole lab part of getting people into the lab. And if you look at current state of TDCS, TACS studies, it's very limited with studies with a lot of sessions over time. And that's simply because of the cost and the hassle of getting people into the lab enough times. So what we wanted to do was to create a TDCS device that was controllable remotely and that gave easy access for anyone to use TDCS at home without needing extra or specialist knowledge. So
I have a question before you go on. I was waiting for you to finish because you were like, "Oh, we started this company for XYZ." Could you go back to the picture?
Yes.
So as I understand what you just said, you have to cross a threshold to even do anything. But if I'm imagining electricity like a fire hose, closer to the hose, if you put like a piece of paper in front of it, it'll just be obliterated, right?
Yeah.
And then farther away, it's like a light drizzle.
Yes.
How do you make sure you don't fry or damage whenever, like I see, maybe there's less danger when you're doing magnetic stimulation, and I don't know much about this at all, so I'm just a noob. But how did everybody find out over time what's enough to cross this threshold, but also not to fry the nerves that are close to the entrance and the exit?
Yeah. So it's a super good and relevant question. So just taking a small step back, so TDCS, TACS uses electrical current, obviously, while a TMS is using magnetic energy or magnetic field, basically. And the problem with TMS to me is it's impossible to do good placebo because you can really feel the effects. So it's sort of I won't say too much more about TMS. It's a super interesting field, but the placebo part is problematic. So when it comes to the electrical stimulation, the biggest sort of threshold is actually getting the electrical currents through the skin. So the sort of worst thing that you can get is that you get a sort of skin burn or a skin you damage the skin. So unless people sort of sit through their skin being burned, then you can't get enough power to reach the brain.
So usually somebody will say stop before that
exactly
happens.
Yeah so that's sort of the I think how to put it, in the extreme case, there are a lot of people out there.
Answers my fire hose question, because there is something in front of it, and it's the skin and the skull.
Yes, exactly. So I think the big question that I'll get back to in a little bit is actually more how much of the current that you do send is actually reaching the brain at all. So that's, I think, that's if sort of in terms of concerns is if you maximize the amount of current you send to the tolerance point of people's, basically the pain receptors in the skin, that's where to me the tricky question is actually how much current do reach the brain.
That's not crazy. Sorry, it's not crazy because I have one of the muscle stimulators, and that's precisely how you use it. There's a dial, and everybody's different depending on how you feel at the moment.
Yes, exactly.
I had a question. Are you going to talk at all about like what amount of fall off there is, like after you pass through the skin and the skull, like while it's going through the brain, what type of fall off overall happens in that? And
tiny bit. Yeah. I'm getting back to the sort of what we know about the spread in the brain in, I think, a couple of slides. So cool. Let's see if I can answer it there. But I think a lot of the the fundamental questions about the safety part, how long can you stimulate, what's the sort of amount of current that is needed to actually have an effect, all these things I would say are pretty well answered for single sessions in all the lab research which is done. I think for me the biggest challenge is actually to figure out what are the the training effects and the cognitive effects over time. Things like, can you overtrain? What happens if you keep sort of targeting the same region while doing the same type of training objects? What are the the other effects you might get. So the, to me, important part about our sort of scientific work is that we have about 2,500 products in the market, and most of them are being used very actively, and we are doing a lot of different type of data collection from people. And just back to the product side of it, so to me, the app part of our product is very important because that's where we can interact with our users. We also have, that's where we take all the stats, and that's where we can get feedback from people. But on the other hand, of course, I'm in no way trying to say that we're not a commercial company, and yes, we do sell a product, and yes, we do have customers, and the sort of the customer value that we are selling are 4 different modes. So dependent on which type of cognitive work you're engaged in, we recommend different types of TDCS activation of these 3 electrodes to support that type of cognitive activity. And of course, this is in no way based on any of the classical simplistic understandings of the brain as being simple to understand, and one part is A and another part is B. That's, I think, a myth that seems to be living on very well. But what we do base our work on is more network theory. So the idea that there are certain type of activation of different regions of the brain that seems to be quite consistent across a population in terms of the cognitive effects they have. So I think one of my favorite examples is the idea of simultaneous activation of the default network and the front left. And this is from my co-founder's research, but he's not the only one who's been studying this, but it seems to be quite a strong correlation between a lot of measures of creativity and people's ability to activate the default network at the same time as frontal activation, especially in the left hemisphere. And this is, to me, a very interesting general finding, because most people will, if you sit down and concentrate on a task, most people will have a deactivation in the default network and of course activation in the executive function networks. But it seems that people who are performing very well on creativity tasks are actually doing the opposite. So when they are concentrating on a task, they have a higher level of activation in the default network, which the hypothesis would be that the default network is where a lot of our more spontaneous activity is happening. So if you have access to spontaneous thoughts and ideas while concentrating, that's positive for creativity. So it's more these type of studies where there are a lot of repeated findings showing that there is a certain sort of network effect. If you have more activity here and more or less there, then that is normally associated with a certain type of cognitive activity. And to the TDCS itself, so I think one of the very persistent misunderstandings about TDCS is that you always have current reaching the brain. And you spoke about noise before on EEG, and I think the current in TDCS, of course, will go the easiest path, and most of the time that is a direct line in the skin, so the current will go in, find a good blood vein, and then flow there, and then the spillover effects to the brain are very small and normally on the surface level. The other thing, as you can see from these 2 simulations, is that the curvature of the brain, the topography, is quite crucial as well. So that since the current is sort of reaching the surface of the brain, then the way the brain is folded actually has quite a big effect on exactly where the current ends up going. And the one of the big things that have happened in the last couple of years is the quality of different type of computational modeling. So this is from a MATLAB sort of TDCS library. called comets, where you can sort of model the different type of potential activation of the brain and how much current will reach which regions where you have these type of heat maps.
Is this what Morgan and John are usually on about when they talk about modeling? Is improving stuff like this, or
Yeah, we're usually talking about SimNibs, but this is a
this type of thing. We were talking about this.
This
We
is
were
a
talking about SimNibs,
concrete-
yeah, but same kind of thing.
Yeah, and I definitely think this is where, you know, the biggest improvements have actually happened recently is if you have a good sort of scan of the sort of physical part of the brain, you can actually do fairly good modeling of how that brain will be impacted. But of course, at Plato Science, our idea is to do distributed large scale. So instead of, you know, looking at one individual and do these type of studies, we try to rather expand it and say, if we do repeated studies with a larger population over time, then hopefully the normal small effect sizes that are shown in lab studies might be clearer in a larger sample. The challenge that we have right now is that the only type of feedback we have would be cognitive feedback and self-reported feedback. Of course, in a lot of fields, self-reported, especially for things like stress and anxiety, is sort of considered quite rigorous methods. But what we're currently working with is to combine those type of metrics. So cognitive tests, we're using a battery from Cambridge Brain Sciences, which is a cognitive test battery which has hundreds of thousands of samples. So whenever you do a study, you can match your population and their results with similar samples from the database. But the other thing that we're more or less looping back to now is to also combine the cognitive metrics with other forms of data collection. So as I said, we've been doing fMRI right now, less of that basically because of the time and the cost. So we're working now with HRV, which probably is my favorite one because it can give you fairly decent data with a continuous data stream. So for anyone who has a decent HRV device, you can actually collect 24-hour data per day. And EEG, of course, the challenge there is that since we're sending an electrical current, there is such a big interference between the two systems. So we've been doing all the stuff we ended up doing was turning the two systems off, on and off, and it's me in the picture here, and I've been doing a couple of days where you do a full day of TDCS where you basically turn the current on and off, on and off, on and off, and it's not a very pleasant experience, to be honest. So I think combining it with EEG is hard. Most recently, we've started working with FNIRS, which I personally really like. I think it's very compatible with TDCS, and we also do work with TACS. We don't have it. We haven't offered it in the firmware for Plato Work yet, our product, but we will. And both those two, TDCS, TACS, maps very well with FNIRS. The problem, as I see it with FNIRS, is the getting it out of the lab. And you might have seen there's a Swedish company called Mendy that has quite a good, that did an Indigo campaign. They have quite a nice product that does FNIRS, consumer grade FNIRS, but it seems that it might actually be sufficient for getting some quite nice simultaneous data from TDCS. So it's a very interesting part.
I had a quick question. Was
Yes.
it HRV at that heart rate variability, or
Yes. Yeah.
Okay,
Sorry.
yeah.
Yeah, heart rate variability. And I think the reason why I see that as such an interesting path because we want to do large scale repetitive studies of people in their actual lives, and since a lot of people do have a continuous data stream of HRV data, it's it wouldn't require distributing any new piece of hardware, because we can actually get quite of the data we need from people who are already using our product, which is very nice.
It's like they would have their normal stimulation that they bought the product to do, but then they like sign a waiver and says, I'd like to participate in the trial, and they do that for 30 minutes. Is that kind of how it is?
Yes, exactly. So we do different type of distributed studies. So first, just to
because
say,
I feel they'd get upset if they go to do a session and it's a placebo session and that's not what they paid y'all for. So you need to let them be like, look, it may or may not be the thing. That's because you're participating. Yeah, great.
Yeah. So we're actually currently, it's funny you say that, because we're currently collecting placebo sort of sign up from our normal customers. So we ask them for permission to do placebo sessions once in a while when they actually ask for a real session, and the sign up seems to be really good so far. So I think that's a cool thing about being an early product, is a lot of our users are very knowledgeable, really nerding this. We have such a good contact with our users, and after the Indigo campaign, we had about 1,500 people waiting for products, and we asked if they wanted to sign up to participate in sort of home experiments, and we almost had 500 people, 490 something people out of 1,500 who signed up for participating in home experiments. So I think that's a good indication of the interest level of the users. So some closing comments from my side. So one of the things that I find very important with our project is having the app. And one thing is the user side, the data collection side, but the other part is doing monitoring. So the app is, of course, monitoring the headsets, meaning we have sort of a whole second safety net. So if there would be any type of fault to a product, the app would detect it. So there are some products out there that sort of is more that doesn't have safety features, and I wouldn't sleep well if I was running one of those companies. So I think that's something we are becoming more and more aware of, the importance of actually having that monitoring. Then we recently started another project that I personally like a lot, and we call it Program X and Y. So we have 3 electrodes. Direct current can go in both directions, meaning that we actually have sort of 6 different combinations we could do, and 2 of them, which would be P set to F4 and F4 to P set, are very uncommon in TDCS research. No one has really done much work on studying the effects of those 2. So what we've done now is basically just launched the 2 programs, calling them Program X and Program Y. And then we ask our users to sort of do home documentation of whatever effect they perceive, and then they report that after each session they tell us what they felt that they perceived, and then if there are any patterns in that, then we will do lab studies where the hypotheses will be informed by what our users actually report. So sort of a bottom-up approach to TDCS studies, which I really like. Then it's also, to me, with the whole project, is the focus on data size. So currently, we've been doing a bit too many studies that require very high levels of compliance. So we expect people to do 7 days plus 7 days following a training program at home, and unfortunately, the level of compliance is very low on that. So we're currently doing analysis, but I think we have sort of 40 data sets by now of that type of data. And to me, rather looking at data enrichment, for instance, using an HRV data stream. Then another thing that we're also able to do with the current setup is doing calibration improvement. So one of the biggest challenges to TDCS is to make sure that you have enough sort of contact to the skin to both get enough current through, but also not making it too uncomfortable for your participants. And because the resistance in the whole system between the two electrodes will change over time, it's actually quite tricky to quickly predict to what extent there will actually be a successful session with the setup. And that's another thing that we can very quickly test. We have about 100 sessions per day, so changing one parameter, we then have 100 new sessions recorded the next day. I mentioned so sham is in TDCS the term for placebo. So it's a sort of you turn the current on, but then you turn it back off, and then you keep sending sort of micro pulses once in a while to create the bit of tingling under the electrode, so people feel they're being stimulated. We're also doing a study that I think a lot of other TDCS researchers will not like, because we're basically testing to what extent people are able to tell the difference between sham and normal stimulation.
About that, I just had an idea. What if you integrated some like haptics that happen in both situations? You yourself, can you feel the difference between a sham and a real?
100%. Yeah. But
yeah, well, what if you added some like haptics that just I don't know.
Yeah.
or tell everybody, I don't. Maybe if you gave the if they were sitting in a massage chair, maybe they would notice the tingling in their skull. I don't know.
Well, it's a really interesting question, and I think my hypothesis is what we'll find is there will be a quite direct relationship between people's ability to detect what is sham and real compared to how many sessions they've had in their life. I think people who have had 1 or 2 sessions will have a very hard time doing it accurately, and people like me who's had probably 1,000 sessions or more, I wouldn't be in doubt, and I don't even know what we could do to trick experience.
In my mind, as a layperson, this doesn't seem that crazy, because electroshock therapy is still like a very last resort thing, and there's a middle ground short of just pumping people full of current like that. I mean, tiny little bits in the right place. It seems like it could help if they had a medical use for that, and they still do for electroshock.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point, and I think full-on electroshock actually has a bad rep, because it's actually a very effective method when used correctly. And to me, unfortunately, a lot of people would think that what we do is electroshock, and the main difference is that an electroshock actually forces activation in the brain, while we can't. There's no way, there's enough.
That's a great explanation. I would echo that to people that are concerned about the safety. And then the other bit, like you were saying, hey, have you ever tried an electrical stim for your back? It's kind of like that. You could dial it down. Maybe, do y'all have a hardware dial it down switch or a hardware off switch in case something happens with the app?
Well, you can just take the headset off, basically.
That's what y'all recommend if you're,
Yeah. So and that's what we tell people is sort of, if you feel any type of uncomfortable experience, just take the headset off. That's sort of the, which I think, sorry, go ahead.
Would there be other ways of doing that? Because I'm thinking about people who might have impaired motor function, like taking headset off might be difficult in certain situations. So if there was a way other than if the app could literally have a big red button on it, that might work, or some other input method that people could use to trigger it, that like either they like one thing I'm just thinking about is literally connect it to any smart device that has a microphone, and you could just tell it to turn off, or yeah, like would there be any way to integrate some other methods to turn on or off the system that would be separate from the device and might not need to be reliant on that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a very interesting question, and I think one of the things that we see now is it seems that we're moving from the super dedicated, nerdy, knowledgeable audience into more sort of mainstream audience, and I think these type of questions and design considerations will be more and more relevant for us going forward. And I think voice control is definitely something that we've looked at building in. We also have done some testing with bone conducting speakers in the headset, so you can actually give people instructions, messages without covering their ears. And I think that's a funny example of, I don't know, you probably all have tried bone conducting speakers, but what we found was that the people who were trying it found it really creepy, because there's sort of a voice inside your head all of a sudden, which is sort of...
I've never tried one, but yeah.
It's fun. It's fun. I've tried a lot of devices with it. The best I tried was Google Glass.
Mhm.
That bone conducting audio was really well done. And even if
Yes.
you plug the headphones in, it would actually synchronize with the headphones and
Yeah.
amplify stuff pretty well.
I see your device. It makes like a V over the top of the head or something. I guess that means it's not compatible with over-the-ear headphones, huh?
Yes, and that's such a good point. So I actually think, let's see.
I mean, if anybody's going to buy a headset, they might need to know at first, like, hey, you might want to use your earphones for whenever you do this or something.
Yeah, exactly. And skip slide. So this is our next product, the model that comes on Indiegogo soon.
All right.
Which is, yeah, so that's more necessary to headphones. And because what we've found is, especially for gamers, but we also have quite some people who are pilots who are using our headsets. And in any context where you prefer to have big headphones on, our current headset is not well suited. It's sort of designed a bit like I guess a design statement, but also one of the key aims when I designed the frame was to use the 1020 geometry. So it's one size fits all, and if you scale it, you actually scale the along the axes from the 1020 system.
Has anyone tried putting this on with like a VR headset or AR headset? Like that version looks like it could. Oh, there you go.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks like it fits. It's just real close to that thing, but it's just right outside the edge.
Yeah. It's so there's definitely been, this is from a study we did with some guys in Copenhagen called Cora VR, and to me it's probably the most sort of obvious future potential usage area for me for TDCS, TACS, because if you have a VR environment that is successfully triggering something desirable, so let's see that you do PTSD training, or you do depression treatments, or any type of remote medicine, if the VR system in itself is successful, it would be very surprising if sort of stimulating the brain at the same time would not enforce whatever effects you have. It's sort of, yeah, it's at least to me a very interesting potential place to use.
Yeah.
So, Balder, I know, or I'm worried for your time.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Thank you. I'm actually 1 minute off.
And so if I could we have you come back? Because
Yeah.
what I would really like, so Balder I know needs to go in like a minute, but what I would really like to get at is one of your early points when you're talking about talking about like that there is definitely a certain amount of like overselling what TDCS is able to do by certain companies and certain individuals. It's tough though. It's tough to get through. It's tough to separate the wheat from the chaff in this, and you know, I wanted to point out like Halo Neuroscience. I dropped a link in the chat of Halo Neuroscience's science section, right? In the sense that like, because I brought this up, I was like, you know, super interested in what they were trying to do, but I was like, where's the science in this? And then if you look at their science section, there's a lot of papers there, you know, and it's pretty difficult to navigate that. I would say, you know, I look at some of those and I say, well, the you know, like these ones are about safety and they don't really have anything to do with priming, you know, and like you know, like, and then just the difficulty of doing training studies and like what are active controls for training studies and things like that. Anyway, I'd love to come back to this because I feel like there is a real issue about navigating the literature on this, about what is effective. In psychiatry, where I'm coming from, I see lots of people, you know, I see lots of companies selling devices that are essentially off-label, and doing. I don't want to pick out Halo Neuroscience as being, you know, some sort of poster child for dummy science. They're, you know, I don't think they are, but that there is this real problem of even like mainstream, you know, people like, you know, Maren Bixum, where it's just like, how much, you know, a small sample study has not been replicated, you know, or
And
how many of these studies have been pre-registered, or, you know, and like, I know you need to go, but
yeah, no, but I find that discussion so interesting, and I think Bixum is a good example, because if you're a professor in neuroscience doing neurostimulation, but you also run the company that sell TDCS devices, then yeah, it is a super tricky space. And I think for us, finding the balance between being, you know, always rigorous and scientific, but at the same time also, you know, presenting an actual user value, and combining those two is really hard. And we're onboarding another professor of neurostimulation who doesn't have a financial interest in any companies as an advisor for us, because I think the work that my co-founder has done, he's been heavily financially invested in Plato Science the whole time. So I fully get that anyone would look at his work and sort of say, well, but you know, what was your interest?
I mean, I don't even know if it's that as much as like, I mean, I just think that even people, you know, I don't mind people being in a company and trying to sift through the literature, but honestly, I think it's hard to sift through the literature and find like, yes, I can push, you know, doing TDCS to you know, make this brain change.
Yeah.
And when like you said, like there's a real issue about how much of this electricity is actually going into the head.
Exactly.
You know, like how much is it actually making it through the skull? Getting it in some sort of dosage.
If you need to sleep well tonight, I know maybe it's already daytime for you, but whatever, you're still gonna go to sleep eventually. You helped me a lot. They talk about TDCS and all the stimulation stuff. And I come from an education background, and like I dropped in the chat, I heard all this like whole brain jargon. So as soon as you put a big red X over that, I'm like, you have my support, man. Yeah, when you're learning, you're using almost your whole brain the whole time. Maybe not literally, but we know it's not. It's all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming today. I personally want to thank you. You've demystified TDCS for me, at the very least.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I think I'm very happy to come back for another meeting, because also for me, the people running the companies making the devices shouldn't hide behind the website. We should be out talking to the supercritical experts like you guys and get your feedback, and also hear, what triggers your bullshit sensors. So I think, these meetings are super inspiring.
And when you're talking, especially when you're talking about giving value to the customers while trying to do research, OpenBCI is right in that same space. And we're just about as transparent as y'all. I mean, so I get really good vibes from y'all, and I've never tried it. I've never seen anybody try it, but I would, your device seems cool. Seems like it does what it wants to do.
So that's a new question, which is just like, how do you actually like measure from like the user perspective? So I know there's a stimulation going on. So if I'm trying to do something like a learning activity and then I use that mode, apart from how I'm feeling, in air quotes, like how does the device or the algorithm or whichever know that, okay, yes, this is enough or this is working as expected? Are you collecting some data at the same time while you're sending the stimulation, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, so we do two different approaches to that. So one of them is basically asking people, did you get what you needed? And that, to me, from a user perspective, that's the most important thing. If I can show you data that it was supposed to work but you didn't feel it, then, so that's one side of it. But the other side of it is we do sort of cognitive tasks. We would do a learning task, and then we would see, are people actually performing better on the learning task while being stimulated compared to if they think they're being stimulated. So that's more the distributed, but we can't, at least that's bullshit. We haven't found good ways of doing both at the same time, because I would love to be able to actually measure to what extent a person reading to an exam, to what extent that sort of that learning experience is enhanced by the headset, independent of whether he or she would report the same thing. But we haven't found a way to do both. So we either sort of do a design data collection, or we do self-reporting from customers, which is more a customer satisfaction point of view. But now I have to run, guys. I'm really sorry.
No, please.
Great seeing you all. And I'll be back.
So much. Thank you so much for your time, Boulder.
Thank
Really,
you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Take care.
Great question, Ori. Glad to see you here too. I remember talking to you at one of the events.
Oh yeah,
So hopefully we'll get Boulder to come back, because and kind of focus in on this question, because I mean,
Can I piggyback on that last one before we move on? Like, he already said they were looking at FNIRS, and that seems like a perfect fit. Obviously, if you're doing EEG, and I have experience with that from OpenBCI, injecting current somewhere on the head just does not seem like a good idea for trying to measure EEG. But FNIRS, it looks at light, right? Photons.
Yeah.
That aren't probably, that's not equivalent to electrons moving around. It's like a different piece of matter. I don't know.
Well, it's certainly something where you're not expecting, crosstalk between your stimulation and your recording.
You can do FNIRS across the frontal lobe, and that's like where executive functioning I thought was supposed to be towards the front, right?
Yeah, I mean, which could be useful depending again on what the task is, and what your kind of like behavioral or learning metrics are. But what I'd really like to get at is that it's difficult, I mean, and certainly want to point out something that John and I were talking about earlier, which was just that like PlatoWorks is a great, like in terms of making a consumer device that does TDCS, like it's pretty remarkable. I don't know of anything that is equivalent in terms of being, you know, low cost and kind of like easy to use, that anybody can point to. And again, like I was saying to John, like, and I hang out in the TDCS subreddit, and I'm familiar with a lot of devices that people are attaching to their head, and I'm not sure if they should, but they are. And
Yeah.
you know,
So
yeah.
one other question I had around this whole stimulation thing was, are there any long-term studies on the effects on people using them? So around addiction, around because I know that this is activating the neurons, right, or activating your brain.
That's John right there.
Well,
Yeah.
it's potentially, and again, like I don't know if it was clear, but you know, there's this there's also a difference of opinion, and it's a kind of controversy in the literature about, you know, what you're making the kind of the positive and what you're making the negative. You know, so if you've got two spots, right, like one spot can be injecting current and the other spot can be the sink, and vice versa, and reports will differ on what that is doing. And again, like I would say in underpowered studies have been done where they've gotten different results, and unfortunately you're still kind of unsure of what's going on because these are underpowered studies. I think some of the meta-analysis gets at you know, some better ideas of what physiologically happening. But I just wanted to point out, like, what I wanted him to come back and talk about is that, like, he's again, like, not saying he's doing something wrong, but like how hard it is both to do kind of like accelerate, like learning studies, right, and then TDCS studies, and navigating the literature on both has some subtleties that is really important to get at, so that you can be sure, you know, so you can feel more confident about, like, yes, this is actually improving learning, and it's doing that because of a, you know, an electrical stimulation effect. Like two different issues that both have kind of like their own design and I want to say like these problems that Stuart Ritchie brings up in his science fiction book, in terms of, like, you can get studies that show significant effects in particular things, but that doesn't mean that those are studies that you should try and, you know, build on. So sorry, Ori, if you've got more questions, or if anybody, yeah.
I see a lot of raised hands actually. So
Yeah.
Ryan.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was very interesting. I'd also like his take on the conversation we were having before the meeting about trying to understand exactly how to properly model the current going through the brain, and like what steps we can take to do that better. And thought it was very important hearing about how, like, everyone's head is so different that you can't really create a base model too easily, or that you'd have to create so many base models that and yeah, that the data would be difficult to get consistent. Like, it would end up garbage in, garbage out very quickly if not done correctly.
Well, there's a good amount of literature on this. I mean, I think with you know, the kind of things that we could potentially do with, you know, like a OpenCV Oak or something, like you know, what we saw with was it occipital makes that
Yeah.
stereo
Yeah,
camera
structure. Yeah.
that's like getting an actual 3D, a really accurate 3D model of the person's head. We could make a lot of good assumptions about what's in there. These would still be assumptions. This is like getting us out of actually collecting, a good half an hour of MRI.
Standing at MRI.
Well, I think I could think of like 2 scanners that are vertical, mostly for primates. So yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But we should do that study to show that the brain pose changes. Anyway, there's been a lot. I mean, people have been doing, because you don't actually need to rely on just the TDCS people. The finite element modeling for EEG goes back to the 90s, and that's what you're seeing with Comet and SimNibs, and there's a Python package called Forward, and ours was called Fiji. Anyway, yeah, money. Well, yeah. There's a lot of, I mean, so Maren Bixum, I think it's Maren Bixum's group makes the New York head model. So that's a standardized finite element model for that is used. Or am I thinking a different group? There's a New York head model that is trying to be this standard brain that can be used for these finite element computations. The big problem, and the reason that we were injecting electricity, the reason that like EGI was trying to do high density versions of this, is that if you inject electricity through the person's head, then you can start to do electrical impedance tomography and actually figure out what their physics properties are, independent of just the geometry, and then assigning the geometry a homogeneous value from a 1970s or 80s paper. Well,
yeah,
these people use like a 2001 paper, but
yeah, I was actually wondering that as well. Would EIT be able to be utilized in conjunction with this as, in essence, a detector to try and figure out where some of the fall off is, or would that
I know from the example of the EIT kit at the OpenBCI shop, I've never held it in my hands. They have in the office. But in the example, it's basically like a tub, and you put something in the middle, and it just maps the entire space in there. So I could certainly see it being used maybe at like an inch away while you've got the electrodes on the head.
Yeah,
so physically it could work.
Yeah, we're talking about a different device. So the company I used to work for makes a thing called G10, and so this is the G10 200, and so this is like a high density EEG system where you can do the electrical stimulation through any of the 256 channels, right? So you put it on the head, you map with a Polaris scanner, and to get the head shape and the electrode positions on that head shape, and now you can inject electricity through different so the important thing is that you've put it on. Now you inject from this pair, this pair, this pair, this pair, this pair, and you go through you don't actually do every pair, but you do a large combination of pairs at, I think Jeff had this at like 200 hertz signal.
Is this for like, thanks for dropping the link. Is this for like clinical or research?
Well, so
doing all those different combinations.
Right. So that's for what Don called conductivity scanning. So this is electrical impedance tomography of the head.
Yeah.
Right? And then what you are able to do, like from MRI, what we generally get is just geometry, right? It gets us a tetrahedral. I mean, it gets us a set of concentric meshes, right? But but then you turn that into a tetrahedral mesh, and you assign physics properties to those tetrahedra that are hopefully, skin, skull, CSF, gray matter, white matter, and blood vessels. So sorry, I'm getting into little details of things people in neuroimaging are pretty familiar with, but generally in fMRI, we only deal with 3 tissue classes, right? We skull strip and we deal with gray, white, and CSF, and kind of ignore the CSF, or you worry about when all your activation is in the CSF. But with this kind of head modeling, you want to try and tackle all the tissue types that are important. That white matter tracks will have a kind of undue influence on the propagation of current flow. So even better is to incorporate diffusion, diffusion tractography into your modeling, and that's what the kind of the latest SimNib stuff is doing. At that point, Richard, is when you can then choose your target and decide, okay, I now get this person's head. I want to put 1 milliamp of current through this particular brain structure. Which electrodes should I be, which electrodes kind of need to be positive, which needs to be negative, and in what distribution, so that I get 1 milliamp passing through that area. That turns out to be super hard. You can predict it computationally.
Yeah. I mean,
trying to do that with EEG. If you're he was saying they turn on and they turn off, but what if you do that in micro sessions of 15-second intervals, and your session is a bunch of those where they get EEG readings and they're looking for these values from a certain combination of electrodes. Turn it on, turn it back off. I don't know.
Yeah. So I mean, the reason that EEG doesn't, or the reason that EEG is hard to make as a good marker for this, is that we don't have a good model for how much activity should we be getting from a particular piece of tissue.
But this does it with current itself, and then uses the same. And that's cool that it's already attached.
So you're injecting through all these different pairs. You're building up this head model, and then you're deciding kind of what your optimal montage is. And by that I just mean which electrodes you're going to assign as sources, which you're going to assign as sinks, and then you can get these maps. So EGI does not make the best software for this, or the most sophisticated software for this. This is still from Denmark. Or I still, I'm curious if there's any new packages for this, but I think SimNibs is still is the current market leader.
What was the one that Balder had up again?
That was Comet from Korea, but it's MATLAB based, so I prefer not to. The software that shall not be named.
Has it got any good features though?
Well, that's the other thing, is that I don't think it really. Oh, sorry, somebody's asking for the password. I've known. I'm familiar with that group, but I haven't seen anything from them in terms of this is a killer feature,
Okay.
And I think one of the things to add to that, I mean, I think they finally added diffusion, but everybody was kind of doing that 5 years ago, I think. So, I think Axel's the person to watch, because he's now doing MREIT. which is like the right way to do it. So what you want to do is inject current while the person's in the scanner, because then you can actually watch the, with the right sensitive protocol, you can basically image the current flow. And that's something, yeah. And there are ways to even image so in animal models, people have even used magnetic resonance spectroscopy to image biochemical metabolic changes due to prolonged TDCS with MindInstall images.
I think big question for things like the PlaterWork device is how much the E-field modeling matters for a low density array. I guess they had the different source sync configurations, which you didn't describe, and they had these jazzy names for them. And then, I guess in principle, like they could move the locations a little bit over here or there, but they're basically using the 1020 locations. So if you were to say like just using 1020 locations, it's like saying doing source localization with an MRI versus doing source localization with a template head, right? When you don't have an MRI, like how good do you get? How much resolution do you lose when you have like a low resolution kind of cheap poor person's version of it, and then what does it matter? And for the case of, I'm actually really interested to know if it could go either way. It could be that you really can get a lot of useful information about how to design and potentially kind of deploy, use, optimize consumer grade TDCS devices with a bit of E-field modeling, like or not. I could go either way. But if you can, then that's interesting, because that's a kind of big space of computational work that's available for
maybe if I was
people who are
designing a
interested.
product from scratch, is 1010 like? Are there more locations in the 1010 system?
Well,
Yeah,
just
but that's the kind of
design your system
subsets.
Yeah, just half the distance of the 1020 system, so that maybe later if research comes out, you could.
It's called 1010 and then 10.5.
Yeah, go down to the lower thing, but I guess the research is going to take a really long time, it seems.
Yeah.
Well, so
Find out more precisely where they should be doing this or that.
Sorry, Ryan, just 1 second. Just to John's point, because I know John's coming from the TMS world, and I don't know if everybody's familiar with this, but in TMS land, and I think this is super important. In TMS land, when you are you're seeing if you've got things placed right? Everybody's got their TMS device, obviously, and they've also got a device to do motor potentials. In case they're not actually doing high density EEG at the same time, right? And the point being that you kind of test out your system by like, hey, can I get it so that I'm getting this reaction from the brain, right?
Yeah, it's like hitting your knee. It's like a knee reflex type.
It's like hitting your knee, right?
Like you're checking that your hammer works.
Yeah, I remember
not
going
made
through
of
that when I got
jelly.
it done.
I meant to ask earlier, Jaden, do you do TDCS? Have you ever done that, or you only do? Which ones have you participated with?
I participated in TMS.
TMS, right?
Yeah.
And I've brought this up before, in the sense that like some of the TMS sites that I like brain clinics, have also focused on TMS where they're getting, say, pupil dilation or heart rate variability changes, and again being like they're setting a kind of physiological threshold, for like I'm doing this and I'm getting this reaction, right? And some of it, or and then just come back to this TMS thing of the motor twitch. is that you have to play around with it a little bit, it's getting it kind of personalized. It's kind of hard to imagine doing that when you don't have the motor twitch. And this is kind of the thing with this is the big discussion that we had, or certainly is always on everyone's mind at like neuromodulation conferences. Is like, I mean, the joke at Neuromodulation NYC was we know a lot about TDCS of TMS. In other words, when we're using TMS to stimulate a motor twitch, these combined TDCS TMS studies have been the best and most informative. Excuse me. I just wanted to ask Benjamin. I don't believe you've joined us before.
Hi. Yeah. No, I haven't, and I'm just soaking this all in.
Sure.
I'm just a Wayland wanderer.
Oh, okay.
Just doing with the wind.
Do you have any devices that you're playing with, or any? No.
I came across Gabe Newell's interview on New Zealand One News, and heard him talking about how you can play with an app one day, obviously play with an app and modify your mood or what you want to be in life. And that just seemed like such a fascinating, twist in the plot of like virtual reality and everything. So I have a mental illness, but I am mostly just an enthusiast at this point. Sure. And I'm not interested in treating myself or, fixing all that. I understand that that's like decades out. So I just am fascinated by this whole ordeal. I mean, this is so interesting to kind of like looking at open BCI and the work that's going on there.
Sure. So feel free to jump in and ask questions, though. And
I will. Yeah.
We thrive with questions, and you can check in the chat for at least some links to some of the things that we've been talking about. We should probably put in more. Anyway, great to have you here. Ryan, I stopped you. Yeah, go ahead.
I just had a question. I was starting to think about with like TCDS and like then using things like EIT as stimulation down the line. Like, has there been any studies about the resolution of TCDS and how that can affect certain things? Like, how much does the resolution matter, or will it matter in different use cases?
And so something that we didn't get into. Sorry, so this is why I'm hoping Balder come back, mainly just to give us, someone to talk to, give us an excuse to be talking about TDCS. But he's using big sponge, or those aren't actually big sponges. When this started, I mean, it was like massive sponges, and some of that honestly also came from the fact that people used to do this in a very crude way for electroconvulsive therapy, right? And but anyway, now we're not trying to induce a seizure. But when you do the computational modeling with the big sponges, it's you're seeing current like everywhere.
Yeah, it was
when they're doing it like this, or
I can't even see it like damaging EEG amplifier if it didn't have something to separate what's coming off of the leads from the main board.
Yeah,
try the ADS or something.
Again, like if hopefully you've already got a past electrical safety to be able to sell your device, so you don't need to worry too much, but like it's anyway, you need to plan for it, but I think it's super interesting if you can get EEG while you're doing this. This is what we want to look at, and this is what Neuroelectrics was kind of an early leader on, in that Neuroelectrics provided a wireless EEG, 32-channel wireless EEG device that allowed you to do TACS simultaneously. And you know, that's, I want to give them props. I like that, you know, I'd like to see more devices, and I love the fact that this is like a $400 device that Plato works.
It's a big difference from a Neuroelectrics device. I mean, those things are 20 grand. The cheap ones.
Right. I mean, you know, like, so this is why, at least for accessibility and other reasons, we need, you know, we need something like free EG32 or in 64, where it's also doing stimulation as well.
Yeah. I mean, how much is the G10-200? Like,
it's a lot. That's going to be about a quarter, 300,000, you know, 250,000. Yeah.
For how many channels? Like,
that's for a 256 system that can do quite a lot.
Yeah, it like that's really cool, but it's like, that price tag is like
EGI are like the luxury ships.
yes.
Like luxury cruises of
again, I know that not everybody wants to plan for this, but the important thing is that you can take that G10-200 system and you can use it in an MRI, right? So not only can I record EEG in the MRI, but I can inject current.
That's what I need for Christmas. Thanks.
Yeah. And get a new Ferrari or a G10.
I would get the G10.
Can it do regular EEG too? So the big net that are.
This is why my wife's like, why do we have?
I'm pretty sure the G10 would have the larger resale value too.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there are some ways we can. I mean, so
the thing is, Morgan, how much do you pay the MR physicist who's capable of dealing with the type of sequence that you need to actually measure those currents that you're injecting in the scanner?
So
there aren't so many of them around.
Well, so you're actually going to request, you're going to request some sequences from some other groups. You're definitely going to be running, in developer mode. So these are going to be whips.
You're going to need an MR physicist.
Well, just to install them. I mean, only because they'll insist on being there to install stuff. But it's not super hard, and you don't. It's not like sequence development. So again, like I think it's a super cool area because if you can do this in the scanner, then you can watch the current flow, right? And that's so much more valuable than our computational electromagnetics, which is making guesses from Maxwell's equations and a whole lot of assumptions about geometry and physics. It's completely and then even when you do the EIT, you've got an inverse solution that, like, there are a lot of different solutions that match your data. So you're, essentially imposing a math constraint to get some sort of result, right?
So how many of these systems do you think there are knocking around? Like, how many people, how many research groups or otherwise have? I mean, is it going to be tens? It's just quite an investment. It's quite niche.
I think that there are like 3 groups that I can think of that would even care to collect this kind of data. Like you said, like too many groups are like, this is more trouble than I can deal with. And I don't know what my payout is, in the sense that like if you've somehow improved your map, you still, so getting back to the question of spatial resolution, right? Can you really target a particular brain area and only that brain area you know, super difficult to do, right? Like it's super hard. So then when they changed from these big sponges where you were, you know, essentially putting current through the whole brain to actually using electrode size sponges, as well as these 4-1 configurations where you've got the source and the sinks right around it, right? So these were much more superficial, much more you know, much more specific. As long as you weren't trying for a deep target, you could say that you had a very limited stimulation. But again, like getting it set up right when you've only got those electrodes, right? It's very difficult to know what you're actually hitting, right? Again, unless you've got like simultaneous MRI. And yeah, so this is what people have kind of moved to, or certainly people are trying to do more specific stimulations, and that's what, you know, Soterix is one company that we know, but the big you know step was Ed Boyton's paper on temporal interference transcranial stimulation, where he's trying to actually stimulate a deep region and not stimulate the intervening tissue. But he's making a whole bunch of, it's super hard to do. You really need to know the head model. You need to know that head really well. And
we're not doing that. We're doing TI without any MRIs.
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question, but it looks like Carlos has had his hands up for a while.
Oh, Carlos, please.
So I want him to like go ahead and say something real quick if he hasn't said.
Oh, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Carlos.
It's oh. No,
Yeah.
not I can see your mute. Your mute is on. You just need to hit the microphone icon.
Nope.
I still
still on mute.
I still
think
see the mute button. Okay.
He might not have selected his microphone. There is next to the mute button, there should be a tiny drop down. Make
Okay.
sure you have the right microphone selected, because if you don't have any microphone selected, it won't ever allow you to unmute.
Oh, okay. Well, he's spoken before. But I think my question was kind of was bringing back to like EEG. Sorry for spoiling the mood around the neurostimulation. I see Morgan was having a fun time.
Okay, let's change it up.
But this was around how do you know what channels to pick for certain experiments? So I know you kind of place you know you have your EEG placed in different areas of the brain, right? But I'm guessing for some activities you probably want some kind of stuff. And now it looks like it's mostly like trial and error so far. But I'm wondering if there's any methodology around, you know, what channels to pick for what you're trying to do.
Could I'll have a quick stab at this. Like it kind of, so the question of like what channels you pick, that's the question around the form factor of consumer grade devices, because at a research level, you have channels everywhere. You have the, you know, the whole head systems, and either you have it at like a low density, like a 20 channels, or you have 256 channels or something in between. But you normally have like recordings from everywhere you can get them from for in like a typical clinical or research case. But if you're talking about, you know, the form factor design of a Muse versus the form factor design of a Neurosity versus the form factor design of the, you know, OpenBCI, then that's when the question that you're asking actually comes in. Is like, well, what are they trying to do in terms of the things they're trying to measure, combined with the type of, again, like form factor they're aiming for, there's something a little bit, well, say like a sleep headbands, for example, or just a headband form factor. I mean, it's not going to go around the top of your head, right? It has to go around that way. So there's and I think probably for the the headphones example, right? It's gonna have to go around that. So I think those decisions are as much they're a combination of what is the kind of the market kind of application that the company is aiming for, what is the form factor that associates to that, and what is the brain activity that they're interested in looking at. And those three things are all kind of at play in those design considerations.
Okay.
A very good example is in a lot of the current VR EEG accessories. Those all use stuff on the back of the head. NextMind, Neurable, I think it was, and like a couple other devices, because most of those are trying to use SSD, and that's something they know they can detect just from a couple electrodes on the back. Now, if they're trying to do some other stuff, you might want electrodes in different areas, but like they know what their current goal is, so they only focus on making those electrodes easy to put on, comfortable to wear for a while. But yeah, it's like if you can get as many channels as possible without impeding comfort too much or actually hindering your own device's utility by making it not able to be compatible with other things. That's where like this TCDS system can be kind hearted. Like people were saying, the current one, it's hard to put headphones on, if not impossible. Same with like a VR headset or a EEG headset or any other type headset. But their new one, which I think looks like a 3-legged head crab, would be able to fit under a lot more devices, and you could fit a lot more devices around it as well.
Yeah, I think what the angle my question specifically was coming from was around a thing of you actually have, so assuming you have a constraint of 8 channels, for example, if you were to use the EEG data, would you actually pick all 8 channels at once and use to train, for example, you train a model, for example, around like some stimulus or some activity, right? Would you use all 8 at once?
Well, like they do with the high density systems, they get them all, and then I've heard Morgan say they just ended up using one channel.
No, wait. Let's be clear. Yeah, sorry. I know Alex wants to say something, but I just want to be clear about what Ori's actually asking here, because I'm hearing a lot of people talk about different things. So Ori, are you talking about how do you pick the channels for stimulating, or for, because certainly there's a big question of like, where should I put, I see this a lot in the TTCS subreddit, like where should I put my channels for stimulation if I want to improve learning or reduce my anxiety, or pick your topic.
Yeah.
Right? What are is that what you're talking about, or are you talking about? Yeah.
My case is more from, say you're running an experiment and you're recording EEG data, right? So you've recorded from a couple channels. So an example is maybe telling the user to write some words down. So you're recording data from all the channels, and you're using like Neurosity, for example. And so the question now is, if I was to, train or model in some form, will I just pick all of the channels, or will it be more like kind of going around to see which one gives the best? you see what I mean?
You'd use all the channels, and you'd do some initial dimensionality reduction, and then you'd work in some reduced latent space. I think that's pretty much every application of any type of EEG recording.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah.
Hey, John, could you share a link on that? That seems pretty important. Oh, there's a
Pyreman. Check out the info on Pyreman. I mean, that's one example.
So, well, sorry, I want to. Alex, you got something you want to add there?
Yeah, there's different ways, depending on what you're trying to do, which is you can try to look for which electrodes are giving you a response per task. So the other thing is some electrodes will have different characteristics than others. So a very simple example, if you're talking about a muse, front electrodes are going to pick up blinks very differently than the rear electrodes. And depending on where you have some electrode placement, like right smack in the back of the head, you might not get blinks at all. So there's all kinds of considerations of like what'll give you your best source. But in terms of like a task specific electrode understanding, what you can do is you can kind of look at like how responsive is this electrode in general, and then what happens when I actually induce this task? Because you'll typically find that one or two electrodes will show a very, very good response, whereas the others may or may not, depending on what activity you've got. You might see really strong, back of the head or front of the head or midline or whatever. So there's different applications, but like when we simply tried putting all the electrodes in a convolutional network, our performance was worse, because 4 channels meant that it was training on the 2 channels that had the good signal and the 2 channels that had the bad signal, and they would get weighed equally. So including the channels that didn't have as much info actually just reduced our accuracy of the classifier. But then when we limited it to the ones that had the better info, the accuracy shot up. So depending on what you're trying to train, you might find that 1 or 2 electrodes either sampled or fed both in. There's all kinds of like, do you want to feed them into different channels on the neural network, or do you want to feed them into one channel that consumes, or like layer that consumes both types? So there's all kinds of trade-offs. But ultimately what we've found is that per task and per subject, we can usually find 1 or 2 electrodes that are going to show you much more response on whatever the task is. And so you can always try all the electrodes, or you can try drilling down into those.
Sounds good. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
So I just wanted to make an announcement for since John brought up Pyreman. We had the Moab developers meeting this morning, San Francisco time, and that was one of the topics that could NeurotechX officially adopt or bring Pyreman under the NeurotechX umbrella, and fork it, bring it into the NeurotechX tent, and start merging a lot of the PRs and give it some of that Eric continuous integration love that we have so appreciated for other projects. And it's funny because I asked Eric if he would help with that, and then I went to Pyreman and saw that he actually has an issue in Pyreman. I'm like, bring this into NeurotechX. So if people are interested in helping with that, we'd love more help. We're super lucky that the Moab GitHub maintainer is kind of a Riemannian metrics EEG expert, and so we've got a lot of good people already, but I definitely am looking for more people to help. I think it's like so many of Alexander Bereshon's projects, it's a gem, and I think we'll get a lot of, or I'm certainly hoping that we'll help develop some goodwill with the M&E community and among others. But the M&E community would be great. So check that out if you're not familiar with it. And yeah, there's some interesting things you can do with it on its own, but it's a dependency of both EEG notebooks and MOAB. So
Sounds good.
use LSL. I wanted to, because well, I don't know if Oscar's still with us, but sorry, John. I kind of wanted to at least mention. I don't know if you did this last week. I've talked about DDCS and sleep, and yeah, but I don't know if Oscar's still with us. Go ahead, John.
Well, if Oscar is here, I'll let him jump in. But if he's not, then Raspberry Pi.
Oh yeah.
I've been installing or attempting to get Muse LSL and EEG notebooks running on a Raspberry Pi, and I kind of got there, but it's been quite painful, and it's not all working.
And you're using Raspbian.
Raspbian, a Model B, 8 gig,
yep.
The new one.
Yep.
So, like, the general question and specific question. General question is like, is anyone else doing this also at any level? And specific question is, where I'm at right now is I have, I think, most of EEG notebooks and Muse LSL running, apart from auditory stim in PsychoPi. Like, I cannot generate a beep in PsychoPi in Raspberry Pi for love nor money. So far, I mean, that's the last thing that I tried, and it's after figuring out a lot of other things. So maybe I'm I was a bit out of energy with my last push at the weekend, but yeah, I don't know if is anyone got a genius answer to my question of generating a beep on a Raspberry Pi Model 4B with PsychoPi or another similar library. Is everyone dealing with any of this at all?
You mean making sound come out of the audio jack or the HDMI?
Is anybody using using Raspberry Pi to do experimental control?
Right.
I use the Raspberry Pi to hopefully collect signals or send a trigger. That's it.
Right. Well, so that's close. I mean, and the question is, what were you using for that, right? So I'm matching John in terms of I've got the same Raspberry Pi, and but I'm running Fedora on it. Okay. Well, I'd love to hear, Santosh, what the Blino board is. So one of the things that I was going to try out was this high density hi-fi DAC for Raspberry Pi, but it requires particular different drivers when they're available, but it'll give me perhaps better control.
Yeah, it's actually
what we're trying to install, or certainly let me make it a bit more. Ooh, that's interesting. Like I said with who was it earlier? Like I said with Poe, right? It's like we're trying to get PsychoPi working as our experimental control software. PsychoPi is certainly a part of it, and like what John and I are hitting on kind of separate Linux distros is that the real problem is not PsychoPi, or I mean, I want to deal with John's audio problem because that's there, but like in general, we're hitting a problem of the install where we're running up against PyQt, like WX Python. Okay, I want to say we can ignore that in the sense that we're not going to run their GUI. Like at least EEG notebooks isn't going to use their GUI,
Yeah, apparently some of the gratings have some OpenGL for transparency or something.
Well,
there's
so but that should be Piglet, right?
Yeah,
I
I mean, I'll dig out a thread that I found informative about this, but I got that working. So you know, at least like the M170 is running. The SSVEP, the screen is a bit of a mess, but it is flashing. But it's got some kind of disruption on it. But really, the issue is the audio thing, and it's
yeah, that sucks. And
like high audio on.
Can you like play an MP3? Have you tried that?
Yeah, that works. Listening like YouTube audio works. You have to tell it tell it that you're using the headphone jack and all of that. But I can't get I can't run any of these like Python auditory stim generation things, and they're calling like PTB and PIO and PyGain.
It's gotta be the lowest level audio that they're using.
Right. Yeah, that seems to be. I think even like Linux beep generation functions aren't working.
Yeah, I
mean, I guess the master test, there should be an operating system built-in test to be like, hey, play the generated thing. So
yeah,
that was just making sure your system worked. That's all. But
yeah, I mean, this is getting at this point that we were trying to raise with Poe, which is that like when these experimental control programs are trying to give you really accurate timing, they're using libraries or using other packages that are trying to give you really low level access. So certainly, again, like PsychoPy started as this vision science thing, so it's really trying to do as raw and as low level OpenGL things that it can do really fast and really accurately. What John is also, if you follow the instructions for PsychoPy install, after you get through installing it, to do auditory, they recommend installing a couple extra things. And so the like to do PTB, what's that?
Tell me.
I mean, well, no. I mean, I think you've done this, but there's, I mean, the nice thing for you in terms of their instructions, which I'll find the exact link, but after the install where they give you like, and then pip install this downloaded file for WX Python, then there's like, if you want to install this like toolbox sound stuff, then install these. They've got it all apt-get install, like libaudio 0.9 or something like that. Like anyway, this is I mean, it's kind of related to the vision thing, where it's just like we need good, like if those libraries aren't working, so Piglet isn't necessarily working with Raspberry Pi's graphics because it's kind of a non-standard graphics chip. So it's cool that you're getting the N170.
Hey, John, you want to answer Ori's question before it gets too late?
I can do. Oh, shit. Hi, Ori. Yeah, I'll answer that question, and then I've got another comment on what we were talking about here. So yeah, we had a first just kind of initial EG Notebooks developers meeting last Friday, and we are going to continue doing them. We said bi-weekly. So not this week wouldn't be the next one, but next week would be the next one. And what we're actually, Ori, it would be great to have you in on the next one if you're available, because one of the things that we're just trying to get down first, I want to bring in Eric as well if he can come, is the kind of development model, and some of the things that we've discussed already is just the kind of code hygiene around the database, but and also just the kind of the process of like issue cycling and code review and get some of those just some kind of guidelines down on that we can kind of point people to when we're bringing in more people. So that's where we're at on the developers meetings is, you know, for the first few, we just want to kind of get that process down, get it documented, and then we'll kind of open it up and start bringing in, you know, more people and talking about kind of a broader set of things. But definitely next time, if you can make it, would really appreciate your insight.
When is the next one?
It would probably, if we stick on schedule and we can be flexible, but it would be 1 p.m. next Friday.
Oh, okay. Let me come back.
1 p.m.
Because I know that's like 10 a.m. PST, right? Yeah, I think it's like minus 3 hours, about like 10 a.m. Yeah, I have a meeting at that time, but I can do like an hour earlier or like an hour earlier before that should be fine with me.
We can move around, yeah. Let's kind of connect on this, and we'll make it work.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll ping you. Nice.
Awesome. Yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah. I'm trying to find it. There's a really good like specialty computer amp. Like it's like a I've been planning to get one for a while for some audio testing stuff, and it's like it literally integrates directly with a small like single board computer, and I think it might not have some of the audio issues because it's like hard coded to be like I don't know if it would fix the issues you're having, but it might have a chance of not having these issues. If you are restricted to using a Raspberry Pi, then that might be a bit harder.
Yeah, I'm going to stick with the Pi for now. I'm not going to venture too far outside of. Yeah, well, I'll try with this until it.
Yeah, still. If you figure out the exact issue, I know at NoiseBridge we have a ton of very high-level audio engineer people who could probably tell you exactly what like hard code issue you might be having if it's a hardware level issue instead of a software bug.
It's at the end of the day, it's just like some libraries aren't compiling, and it's like Python like library support issue.
And there I posted links where I made Docker containers, multi-architecture for both ARM HF, ARM64, and AMD 64. I tried them on Orange Pi, Raspberry Pi, and on any usual Intel AMD computer. So I'm using audio there, the integrated virtual system. So I'm using them in Docker Compose scenarios, using getting data in OpenVibe, EG data, and then EG OpenVibe server, then OpenVibe designer, then in PsychoPy, pure data for audio, PsychoPy for scenario, and processing for another visual effects and audio effects.
So Docker container on a Raspberry Pi running PsychoPy and performance is okay?
Yes, okay. In Docker Compose.
Yeah.
Can we just use PsychoPy?
Yes, I think it can be done, and I'm using their XFSE virtual environment, graphic environment. So they are using VNC virtual VNC, but there is no GUI VNC. So I mean no VNC. So they can be used from browser. All of these Docker containers can be used from just simple browser. So no, without any external VNC program.
Do you have like notes on setup for this? Do you have any links you can point us to?
Yes, I have.
I mean, in your own time,
data.
like if you have the lying around, that'd be great. Or you can post it on the Slack at a later point.
Yes, I will send you.
Well, I wanted to
Docker Compose scenario for pure data.
Cool.
So we will. I wanted to point out to everybody that next Monday, so 9:30 Pacific time in the morning, 12:30 East Coast, we will be having at the Paris Hack Night. We'll have Jason Farquhar presenting the Mind Effects software, and so he'll be doing a live demo, I believe, of his P300 speller, and again, like, this is all open source code. When Mind Effects started, they were doing everything on a Raspberry Pi. I don't know if you will have any great insights, but I also think that they decided to not use the Raspberry Pi anymore, and maybe that is our answer.
I didn't say that. I just bought it, man.
No. We will make it useful. We will make it useful.
Well,
but
you're also talking about a year's difference, and maybe somebody made it updated the library by now for Raspberry Pi.
Well, he was trying to do something else. Sorry, go ahead, Ryan.
Yeah, I just found the board I was talking about, and it does work with Raspberry Pi. It's called the Kada Tone 1. It's in terms of high end, like, you cannot beat this unless you go to about $500 and a literal behemoth on sitting next to your computer. Like, this thing, if you look at the actual scientific testing of it, it is really absurdly low noise floor, low distortion. What the tone you generate will be the tone that comes out of it. It's pretty awesome.
It has an SPIF out. That means they ain't playing. If they really put a SPIF on there and not just a red and a white. Oh, man.
So
how much?
Cool. This is
it should be $99, I think.
Yeah, and that's exactly. I mean, this is essentially what I've got. That it also includes a case.
Yeah. They dropped price $80.
Yeah. So it's important that it's going to be supported by these libraries that I put in the chat.
So what's the point of having such a high-end audio card attached to a Raspberry Pi? Just to have that.
Right, yeah.
Well, so the only thing that I would want to add is that to do the simulation in the scanner, you want to use Etymotic headphones, and so at least this particular card that I've got will give me, like, I can plug in these Etymotics, and these are pneumatic, so they are basically attached to an amplifier that's sending sound waves through really, really long tubes that then go into your ears, and it's actually kind of nice to have that. That's a particular case. I think the only
Richard, I'll give you another case, Richard. The comment that I posted there, like the last part of it, and I don't know who this guy is. His acronym or his initials on that thread is MDC. Sounds like he's a main Raspberry Pi developer. Anyway, sorry, CyclePi developer. But he's saying having CyclePi on the Raspberry Pi is something I personally want, because an experiment can access the GPIO, giving near real-time triggering and event callbacks without the need for a separate device. So basically, it sounds like from what he's saying there that you can achieve very good latencies with a Raspberry Pi, because you have like direct board access, and that's something that's better than going through, Windows OS and all the layers that take you. It sounds like that's the argument he's making. I'm not super I think expert on the chip structure of a Raspberry Pi, but I kind of get the gist.
Yeah, I mean, it's also like it's the microcontroller access that you've got on the Raspberry Pi. Like you can get it to generate these, like GPIO commands and things like that. Like you can, integrate it into other electronics.
Well, this board that Ryan shared, I think it actually doesn't sit on a Raspberry Pi. It says it sits on something else, Kata.
Or it can. That those GPIOs match.
Oh, you can. It's the ones you put on, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, it's designed for its own single board computer. The Vim, but I just double checked, and it sits on Raspberry Pis as well.
If I was gonna make a new instrument, maybe this would be an easy reach. For the audio out. Just use a Raspberry Pi to handle the logic, and then this would be your like if you were gonna make a CDJs that all the DJs uses, those are like $2,000 units. You could probably, with this high end thing with the Raspberry Pi, you could probably make one for a couple hundred.
Yeah, I'm trying
Sam,
to.
Do you want to say something about some of the equipment that you're playing with? You dropped a link to, what was it called? Blino?
Oh, Blino, yes. Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yeah, so Blino.io is actually the link. So if you're looking at this, it's actually, it gives us pretty much all the EEG frequencies. And it actually, I got this from Tindy, from UK. It's actually, I started building this, and it comes with two kind of probes. And of course, one is a ground, behind the ears. So I wanted to kind of test behind the ears EEG for some of my work. So that's the reason I brought this, and it actually I don't want to kind of open this. This is a brand new one, but yeah, this is pure. I mean, it fits with the Raspberry Pi.
Cool. Yeah, I've never.
The Pi Zero as well.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Where can you get it?
Tindai, it's a
yeah. Because I found the documentation you linked to, but I don't. Oh, here's the Tindy store. Cool. Okay, I got this Tindy store. I'll paste it in.
I believe Tindy is also somewhere you can get the open source ultrasound board.
Yep.
One thing I want to emphasize is because of the COVID-19, the shipping is very delayed. It gets stuck in customs, and they have increased the price for shipping too, and that's everywhere the case, But yeah,
sure,
that's fighting a lot.
I also know that like right now a lot of parts around the world are out of stock, especially certain types of amplifiers, like literally over the past like 4 months, certain parts, amplifiers, motor controllers and stuff. I know people who their bill of materials for projects like this went from $20 to 200. Like, I definitely, if they haven't changed the price too far, it might be good to double check what part it has on it, because yeah, it's scary right now. People are buying up the entire world's supply in certain amplifiers from Texas Instruments, and like 5 other companies. Like literally, there is none out there that. So I'm worrying it might start hitting the BCI open source market pretty quickly. Yeah.
I have some questions about this device. So I see it has two plugs, one for a single channel and one for one ear clip. But it's got a lot of stuff on it, and I guess this still fits on top of a Pi Zero or something. Is it powered separately from the lithium ion plug? And what's up with the USB-C plug on there? Can you program this hat or something? Or
Actually, I should have actually bring this. So it's powered by the USB separate, so USB-C. So that is actually necessary. So what is this?
Well, I thought if it was plugged in over can it be used by itself?
No, it cannot be.
Oh, okay. Well, it doesn't get power from the Pi. Oh, it doesn't. You have to power it separately.
Power separately, yeah.
Yeah. Whenever the OpenBCI has this Wi-Fi Shield product, and one of the best ways to do it is to power the Wi-Fi Shield separately from the board that has the amplifier on it.
Right. This also needs to be separated and powered separately. And the Raspberry Pi.
It helps lower the noise. Are you on the Reno team?
No, I'm not from the Reno team. I am actually in the East Coast. I work for Booz Allen, but I work on a lot of neuroscience work, fMRI, EEG.
Yeah, it's cool. I like that y'all just share I'm looking at a huge picture of the actual board. It's all there. I can see it, and I'm just asking some questions. It's cool.
No.
It looks a little safer than the other single channel do-it-yourself.
Yes.
I forget the name of that one, but this looks, not to knock that, because it was made like a while back. What's it called?
You're talking about OpenEEG?
No, the single channel do-it-yourself one that was kind of like let's do this kit and we put it together.
You're talking about ECBCI.
Oh,
yeah, Itsy Bitsy. This is a little bit safer than that, but Itsy Bitsy was done then, and here we are in 2021. This is cool. I would see if they want to reach out to Joe and see if they want to sell it in our shop. It's pretty cool.
Go ahead.
There I posted a PsychoPi link, Docker Compose scenario, and there another link for many other Docker Compose scenarios, and another about where to run these containers. I am designing next after FreeAG 32, FreeSmartAG 64 version, where already based on STM 32MP 157. This is a chip with Linux and with a controller. So this have a Cortex M4 and 2 Cortex A7. So I run on them Docker containers with OpenVibe, PsychoPi, anything, and it have onboard controller. So it's running firmware of controller on this Cortex M4. I connected it to AD7771. It can be about ADS 1299. So getting EEG data, and then we are virtual OART, the virtual OART port. It going to Linux, and processing on Docker containers. It's multi-architecture containers, so they're running on any ARM-HF, ARM64, Raspberry, Orange, anything. So no need compilation, just and this Docker container they compiling on QEMU. So I compiling them on AMD 64. So ARM-HF compiling on AMD, and it can be running with 4 times slower. But they're with this QEMU. So compiling on any 64, AMD 64.
Thanks, Dimitri. Really appreciate it. And yeah, we should all do. I should do more stuff in containers than I do. It's 8:55, so I just want to do just a quick heads up for next week. Like I said, join us on Monday for Jason Farquhar and Mind Effect demoing, more kind of adaptive experimental control.
Where's that at?
That's right here. We meet every Monday in the same Jitsi, but in Paris. It's I co-host it with NeurotechX Paris, and that way we catch good speakers from in the European time zones. So this is Jason Farquhar, who will be joining us from Nijmegen, and yeah, should be interesting, as well as we want to push other alternatives to EEG notebooks when we're talking about adaptive kind of paradigms, that more kind of like the P300 spellers and things like that. That's what Mind Effect is developed for. That's what Time Flux is for. And we'll talk a little bit about, Time Flux is based in Paris. Hopefully, Pierre Clisson will join us and talk about what Time Flux and Mind Effect are doing together. But part of it at an engineering level is the fact that Jason is trying to do, Jason's using Python to try and do really fast screen calls, and Pierre's using JavaScript. And they will talk about the difficulties of getting that accurately, especially when you're talking about these kind of rapid paradigms that spellers and other kind of SSVEP applications are trying to do. So that's one thing. Tuesday is for anybody who's interested in robotics. We've got the Ignition Robotics Community Call. So this is a place to learn about some of the software that's associated with ROS. In this case, I think they're going to be focused on some of the auxiliary libraries, but again, they're look ahead to the meetup agenda for next week, and you'll see links for this. And then a couple of cool webinars. So Neuroelectrics is doing a webinar on gamma stimulation for Alzheimer's, and this is one where it sounds too good to be true, but they've got some really interesting animal work that's come out of Harvard on this, in terms of this kind of stimulation in animal models is doing something. So we've talked a little bit about this in terms of I think it's the Wise Institute there. Anyway, should be good. I'm certainly hoping to see what they claim to be able to do in humans. And
just a quick question. Where can I find the link for the Paris meetup? Is it in the meetup or?
Yeah. So whoops. And you know what? I'm just seeing right now that the meetup agenda, I have the wrong link in the meetup agenda, but it is CogLab, or the Paris group actually predated NeurotechX, but here they are, and so that you can get a link. So that's a link to the the meeting on the 22nd, and check out more detail, or check out the details on that, because Jason's making all the software and links. He's to some degree he's reprising his presentation to the BCI Unconference that was last week, but we get to this is going to be a small group, and we get him and his developers. So I really want to try and get as many people live as possible, because we really will have quite good access. And yeah, so check out the Neuroelectrics webinar. MagStim EGI is also doing a webinar on autism biomarkers and research using TMS and high density EEG, which will tell you some about, is going to be another great, it's going to be a great webinar that's telling you why MagStim was interested in EGI. Because here, these are two separate companies that were separate for a very long time. I mean, I think they both have roots back into the 90s, and yeah, but they will really be better together, I think. And of course, the other huge thing next week is Cosine. So Cosine is going to be starting on the 23rd, I think, as tutorials or workshops. And if you're not familiar with it, check it out. There is going to be, more so than the, sometimes you see a lot of, you see some computational neuroscience at what are ostensibly machine learning conferences. This is a conference of neuroscientists, and so I think this is the meeting to
wasn't there supposed to be a new tutorial coming out from NeurotechX, and they were redesigning the learn dot?
Well, so
Harrison Canning's working on some content with them. Is that coming soon?
Yeah. So I don't know if anybody caught this last week. For us at NeurotechX Barcelona, hosted the BCI guys talking about their coursework, their MOOC plus updated materials. And so I don't have any details on that. I'm super curious because I don't know if Manuel is still awake, but Manuel is one of the people working on several of the we've got several translations in the works. Manuel's probably got the one that's furthest along, which is Spanish, of the learn.neurotech.edu. So I'm curious because, of course, is that material is going to change, then we got to update our.
I remember recommending that, but I think y'all already knew about it.
So is their MOOC different to the stuff that was being put together in the EDU working group?
Yes and no. I mean, because they were obviously involved in that working group, and so I think
I know I was in their group with them working on this thing. So they just gone off and done it themselves.
They have, but they have done it with NeurotechX.
Okay, they just didn't tell me after I spent 20 hours working with them on those documents.
Yeah.
Cool. Very cool.
I talked to Yannick about it. I mean, I don't know the backstory to this at all.
Right.
You know, and I don't know if it's like I mean, I know that Yannick felt
Well, the Slack history doesn't exist, so you know,
And it's Slack
there's no evidence that I was ever involved.
Yeah.
Are you saying you made a change before they started the translations? Because that's the whole trick.
No.
Translations is when you change your docs, they might have to be redone.
No, there's lots of Google Docs and like curricular specs and things that we were putting together and figuring out the order for what would go in a curriculum and what would be like the first module, the second module, the third module, and what would be like the scope and what should be in and what shouldn't be in. And we were talking to the guys from Berkeley who had that all nailed down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take care, Ori.
You know, it would be great, of course.
I mean,
yeah.
I would love there to be more communication about this, you know, and
it would be great if somebody made a curriculum that could be taught to all undergraduate majors. Something that could be included in their basic science classes. That currently doesn't exist, and maybe even the undergraduates that are interested in bioinformatics, they may not even have a system.
Yeah. I mean, Ori,
we don't even have a degree for bioinformatics down here in Louisiana. Maybe at Louisiana State, maybe.
So
maybe
to answer Ori's question in the chat, like I do think that there are some resources that you can look at now, and if in lieu of something, you know, waiting on something, I would check out something like the ERP bootcamp from Steve Luck. That he will certainly teach you about designing and running an experiment, an ERP experiment. You know, if anything, it will be a very traditional ERP experiment, but he does have a lot of training materials, and you can just erpinfo.org. And
yeah, that designing experiments isn't something that it certainly wasn't something that was covered in the 101 curriculum that we designed on that working group. And honestly, like that's actually more like graduate level psychology type thing, like designing experiments. Mostly you just learn about what people do.
Yeah.
You don't learn how to put things together until. So yeah, I think Morgan's right. That
cool. I was just taking notes. Thank you very much.
And
I'm
Manuel,
gonna drop and go pick up my food from outside, or else the person is gonna leave me alone. So,
take care. Take
cheers,
care.
everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah. So, you know, I'm interested to know what John will be tracking at Cosine next week, and you know what we should. Yeah.
not sure.
Okay. Well, you know,
so much going on at the moment.
But
oh man, Colonel AREBs. Jeez.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. I want to. I mean, I've already sent this to John, but I want to talk about it to everybody just because it's a super opportunity. Collar Cocken is going to be talking about Neurolib next week as part of this INCF, I think OCNS software working group thing that they did NeuroFedora this week, which was great to see.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah. So Ankur presented, which was awesome. And it was great because, you know, I'm there, I'm watching and there's Collar and I was like, hey. Like we should add Neurolib, and well, we can get into why. And he's just like, well, come to the, you know, like happy to try and add it to NeuroFedora. Come next week when we talk more about Neurolib. Cool package. So check it out. I want to say it's the 23rd, 22nd. Yeah. So check the meetup agenda for next week. where you'll actually see more events because I think I basically hit the 4,000 character limit. And so I can only add a certain amount for next week's events. So keep an eye on that and see you all next week. Take care.
Good session.
And
See you guys.
thank our videographers, Ryan and Alex, and everybody on the East Coast that stays with us till the bitter end.
Yeah.
Peace out.
Cool.
Check out.
Cool. I stopped the recording.